When we think of logic, we usually picture something pretty rigid, cold, hard rules. But what if the most important rule isn't just about truth, but about connection? What if, for an argument to actually make sense, the pieces had to genuinely relate to each other? Well, today, we're diving into something called relevant logic, a system built to find those real, meaningful links in the way we reason.
So here's the game plan. We're going to start with a really weird puzzle that classical logic cooks up. Then, we'll introduce the hero of our story, relevant logic. After that, we'll see how it works by going past simple true or false statements and looking at context. And finally, we'll wrap up with why these real connections matter so much.
All right, let's kick things off with a contradiction that kind of messes with your head. How is it possible for an argument to be perfectly logical, completely valid on paper, but at the same time, feel completely and utterly wrong?
To really get this, let's look at a slightly different version. Imagine this statement: if the moon is made of green cheese, then water is H2O. Now, that sounds totally absurd, right? But get this, in classical logic, that's considered a valid argument. How on earth is that possible? Well, it's because the first part, the premise, is false. And in classical logic, there's this strange rule that says from a false statement, you can prove absolutely anything. The system doesn't care that cheese and water have zero connection. This is one of those paradoxes of material implication, where the logic works, but our intuition just screams that something is broken.
And this really gets to the heart of the difference here. Classical logic is, you could say, obsessed with truth values. As long as the true-false equation works out, the logic is considered sound. But relevant logic comes along and asks a much more human question. Are these ideas actually connected? It insists that for an argument to be solid, it can't just be technically true. There has to be a real, meaningful link between the premise and the conclusion. So how do we fix this strange disconnect? Well, a whole new system was developed to do exactly that. It's called relevant logic, and it's basically the hero of our story today, designed specifically to get rid of these nonsensical but technically valid arguments.
Its mission is pretty simple but also pretty profound: to build a formal system of logic that actually mirrors how we naturally think. It adds one critical rule to the game. For an argument to be valid, the things you start with must have something to do with your conclusion. I mean, the makeup of the moon has absolutely nothing to do with the chemical formula for water. So under relevant logic, that crazy argument just fails. The link is missing. Simple as that. Now, the key idea that makes all of this work is called entailment. This is the absolute heart of relevant logic. It's the formal way of saying you can't just randomly jump from one fact to another, even if they're both true. There has to be a real, meaningful relationship that actually carries the logic forward. And this isn't some fringe idea, it's a deep and really serious field of study. Foundational books like Entailment by Anderson and Belknap spent decades mapping out precisely what it means for one idea to truly and necessarily lead to another.
So, how does it actually work? Well, to build this whole new system, logicians had to go way deeper than just labeling stuff true or false.
This really required a huge shift in thinking. The classical view, what's known as Fregean logic, basically treats a sentence as just a label for true or false. It's a binary, on or off system. But relevant logic takes a non-Fregean approach. It argues that a sentence is so much richer, it has deep meaning, it refers to an actual thing or state of affairs in the world. So the focus shifts from just a simple true-false value to the complex, real relationships between the meanings themselves. And this shift in focus is incredibly powerful. Seriously, it's a game changer. By looking past simple truth, you can start to build a logic that aims for genuine, intuitive reasoning, the way we actually think. This whole process forces you to uncover the hidden philosophical baggage we carry around with words like if and then. And what you end up with is this amazing, unified framework that lets you study and compare all kinds of different logics. But it gets even more interesting. This connection we're talking about isn't just about the words themselves. It's about the context they exist in. It's all about the situation. Think of it like a game. First, you set the scene. You establish the context, the situation. Then, player A makes a claim based on some premise. But then, player B can challenge it, asking, hey, wait a minute, is that premise actually relevant here, in this specific situation? The connection isn't judged in a vacuum. It's evaluated right there within that shared context. That's the core idea of what's called situational semantics.
And all this brings us to the final, and I think most important point. Why does any of this, entailment, semantics, situations, actually matter? What's the big takeaway here?
It's this. When you see that arrow in relevant logic, A leads to B, It means so much more than if A is true, then B is true. It means A has a genuine, meaningful relationship with B. It signifies a real connection. It's not just an abstract rule, it's a relationship.
So when you start demanding a real connection, it reveals so much more about how we think. It forces us to actually see the deep, intrinsic links between ideas, not just their surface-level truth. It pulls back the curtain on the underlying philosophical assumptions we make with every single argument. And maybe most importantly, it shows us just how much our reasoning depends on the specific context or situation we find ourselves in.
So this leaves us with a pretty provocative question to chew on. If even the formal foundation of reasoning, logic itself, is made better by demanding real connections, what does that say about our own thinking? What hidden connections, or maybe missing links, are guiding the conclusions we reach every single day, and everything from our personal beliefs to how we develop artificial intelligence? It's definitely something to think about.